How do you say what you do for work in Spanish? For example, I am a manager of this, or I'm an engineer, and I work for this company.
By the end of today's episode, you'll be able to say what you do for work in Spanish, even if your job isn't super common or you're a student, and you'll get to try it out yourself in today's Reto de la Semana. Welcome to Spanglish Friends, the podcast for true beginner Spanish learners.
Hola amigos, I'm Val, your experienced Spanish teacher and co-host from Venezuela.
And I'm Em, your Australian co-host who's been learning Spanish for 10 years.
We'll help you get confident listening and speaking beginner Spanish with content you can actually use in real-life conversations.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on socials at Spanglish_friends. Let's get started.
Comencemos. Buenos días, amigos, and bienvenidos a nuestro episodio 44. Welcome back to episode 44 of Spanglish Friends.
Hola, Spanglish friends. Today we're focusing on another very practical beginner's Spanish skill, which is talking about your job or profession.
This comes up all the time in Spanish when introducing yourself as a beginner. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you'll be asked.
Absolutamente, Profe Val. That's right. In this episode, we're answering 3 questions that beginners always have about this topic. Certainly, I had them when I first started learning Spanish from scratch.
They include, how do you say common jobs and professions in Spanish? What do you say if your job isn't a common one? And how do you know which words to use, especially when jobs change depending on gender?
You're going to hear all of this discussed in our mini conversation, nuestra conversación pequeña, and then we'll break it down step by step. In a moment, you're going to hear Profe Val and I have a short conversation where we're pretending we're 2 people meeting for the first time, talking about work, our professions.
Remember, amigos, recuerden, amigos, you don't need to understand every word. Just listen for any job words you recognize. This is about understanding, not perfection. Amiga, ¿estás lista?
Sí, estoy lista, Profe Val. Comencemos.
Hola, buenos días. ¿A qué te dedicas?
Soy administradora y trabajo como gerente en un banco.
Ah, qué bien.
¿Y tú? ¿En qué trabajas?
Yo soy profesora y trabajo en una universidad.
Okay, friends. If that felt fast or it felt very unknown, do not push the panic button. That's completely normal for beginners. You weren't meant to understand every word yet. And if you caught maybe just one little word in there, you're doing great. Your Spanish is improving. Woohoo!
What you just heard was a simple conversation about jobs and profession that you might have. This is exactly the kind of Spanish we are working towards learning today. And it's a model of today's reto as well.
So let's slow things down and break everything into easy, chunkable pieces so you can start using it for yourself right now.
Let's start with, how do you say common jobs in Spanish? The most common way to say your job is using soy, which means I am, plus your profession. Again, here we're using the verb ser to describe it.
That's right. Like, I am this profession. I work in this profession. So here are 5 very common professions you'll hear all the time. Notice that they have different endings based on if it's a male or female identifying individual saying their profession.
We are going to start saying the male and then the female. They include teachers, we would say profesor or profesora. Lawyers would be abogado or abogada. Engineers, ingeniero, ingeniera. Now with administrator, you can say administrador or administradora. Doctors would be doctor, doctora. And if you're a student, for students, you can say estudiante. And this one doesn't change.
Now, notice something important here, friends. Some jobs will change for masculine and feminine identifying individuals, like ingeniero, ingeniera, but some, like estudiante, they say the same no matter what your gender is.
You don't need, at the moment, to memorize all of them. This will come with time and practice, but it's good to be familiar. with some of these common professions. As you're bound to hear them again in the future, you might recognize the patterns of its endings that might change between masculine versus feminine.
Yes. And it goes back to our rule we teach all the time on this podcast, which if it generally ends in O, it goes with the flow. It changes its ending. If it ends in other stuff, it stays tough. Like in this case, estudiante ends in E, you don't need to change the ending based on someone's gender. Okay, now moving to our second question, which is a big one I certainly had as a beginner. What do I do if my job isn't a common profession, like one of the ones Val listed before? What if it's an obscure job with a weird title, like I'm a manager of something or I'm a designer of something? I've definitely had this problem in the past. What do we do, Profe Val?
This is very normal and very common as well. Not every job has a simple word in Spanish. And in this case, we have two great options. Chun, chun, chun. We can say the option 1 and explain as trabajo como or trabajo en, plus the place where you work. This means I work as, and you add the company. Trabajo comes from the verb trabajar, which means to work.
That's right. So you could say before, like we said, soy administradora, which is I'm an administrator. But because my work is more specific, you might like to say something like trabajo como gerente en un banco. Let's break this sentence down. Trabajo como is I work as Val mentioned. Then I said gerente. This is a very common word, which is a manager. Gerente en un banco. En means in, and I've said a bank, un banco. Trabajo como gerente en un banco. This is an example that my character used in the mini conversation earlier on.
Another example of what I used in our mini conversación, nuestra conversación pequeña, I said, yo soy profesora. I said my profession, I am a teacher. And then I said, trabajo en una universidad. I work in a university. Again, using this to be more specific.
That's right. Again, noting here that we might need to say un or una to say a place, depending on its gender as well. When in doubt, Google it. Our top tip is that if you have a fun, weird, obscure job, if it's bizarre and you're not quite trusting what the translations online are giving you, why don't you pop your job title in the comments and our very own Profe Val will help translate it to you directamente en español, directly in Spanish. Super handy if you can hardly explain your job in English and you need some help explaining it in Spanish.
Use trabajo when you want to add more information, where you work or what you do day to day. You can say trabajo en un hospital. I work in a hospital. Trabajo en una oficina. I work in an office. Here we have two very good words. Hospital means hospital and oficina means office. You can combine them. You can say, soy ingeniera y trabajo en una empresa grande. I'm an engineer and I work for a big company. Empresa grande.
Empresa means company. Nice. We've learned some new vocab today. So in summary, Spanglish friends, you now know 3 things. 1, how to say common jobs in Spanish using the structure of soy plus the profession. And you know that some gender endings need to change depending on whether you identify as masculine or feminine. Secondly, you now know what to do if your job isn't common. You can use trabajo como and then the job. Like trabajo como gerente, a manager, and the place that you work. En una. Okay? The third thing you learnt is how do you choose between ser and trabajar, these 2 verbs when talking about your job, what you do for work. Use soy when you're talking about professions, well-known professions, versus trabajo when you're needing to describe the specific work that you do in more detail, particularly if you have a strange job title that you can't even explain to your friends in English.
Awesome. Thank you, Em. These are exactly the tools you'll use to get involved right now in today's reto, our challenge. So, our challenge for you all to put your new Spanish skills into practice right away.
That's right. So tell us in the comments right now in Espanol what you do for work or if you're a student.
You're going to start your sentence with soy or trabajo como. Don't worry if it's short. We're just trying to put everything that we've learned today into practice.
Pop your answer right now in the comments or send us a direct message on Instagram, and we would love to feature it in an upcoming episode. So who's going to surprise us this week with an awesome, weird job that they have?
Speaking of reto, this week's shout out goes to Buddy. We don't know if that's your real name, who commented on YouTube saying, "Thanks so much. I'm actually learning Spanish."
Well, that's great if you're actually learning some Spanish from us, buddies. That's music to Val and I's ears. That's all we wish. That's all we long for. Que bacán.
Great work today, Spanglish friends. Maravilloso. Qué chévere. And remember, practice makes progress, not perfection.
Exactamente. And quickly, spoiler alert for next week. We're going to dive deeper into how do you describe the location where you live in Espanol? Like, do you live in the city? Do you live in the countryside? What's the weather like where you live? Is it hot? Is it cold? And how do you tell people what you think about your city? Is it beautiful? Is it old? Is it quaint? Is it small? We're going to teach you how to describe where you live.
Me encanta this idea of episode. I love it. Amigos, nos vemos. We are going to see you soon. Ciao, ciao.
Bye, Spanglish legends. Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Spanglish Friends. We are both so proud of the time you're investing to level up your Spanish skills.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow us, leave a rating, or tell a friend about the show. It helps our awesome community grow.
Join fellow beginner Spanish learners by following us on Instagram and TikTok at Spanglish_friends.
Congratulations on taking another step in your Spanish learning journey.
Hasta la próxima, amigos.